Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast. Coming to you today from Podcast Land. Yes, that'll do nicely. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I am your host today. And joining me, as always, is your host Conor O'Brien. How are we doing, Conor?
It took me a second to see what you were doing there, and then I'm like, "Oh, I get it." He's like being like the DM who's really bad at improv. It's like you arrive at a dwarven town. What's the town called? Dwarfton. Yes, that'll do.
I did have a moment like that in the game recently, and I just pulled out a word, and I was like, okay, now I just have to go with this for the rest of the game. That's grand. That's fine. They were like, I was like, there's this red star, and they were like, what's the star called? And for somehow in all of my prep for the session, where I was writing about the star and hinting about the star and putting it into lore, didn't give it a name.
Yeah.
And then my players went, what's it called? Because they found a book that mentioned it, and I was like, and all I could think of was the goddamn red moon from Exandria, which is called Ruidus. And I went, yeah. Rune. Yeah.
I've been there. I'm realizing something now before we even really get into the meat of this podcast. So you guys probably guessed by the title of the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about session prep and how we plan out our notes before a session and stuff like that as dungeon masters. I'm realizing I'm going to have to give you a significant peek behind the curtain as to my mental process when it comes to this.
That was not the intention. I'll just be clear. That was not the intention. I'm not trying to get cheat codes for D&D here.
Yeah, I may need to show you some of my tells because I know I have them, but I don't think everyone picks up on them in the party.
There'll be no judgment here. I definitely, absolutely have tells as a DM and a player. But yeah, so we're going to talk about session prep, and I was saying to Conor before we kind of really got into it, it's kind of determined a bit by your DMing style, and like and I'm going to tie it into something else here. It's kind of tangentially related, but I think is a really good way of explaining your prep style and kind of how different styles of DMing work. But like, so there's people out there. I like to start like writers. I like to break into like kind of two camps. You've got people who will be like crazy organized and will go down to the finest detail of like, this happened because of this and this, and these families are feuding, and because they're feuding and they control these resources, this is why the city is like this. And then
the blacksmith's daughter's dog's name is this, and he's the third puppy from this dog they had 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then there's other people who will go, right, there's a city, this is its name, it's known for this. And then anything the players ask them about will be improvised sort of around it. There might be 3 or 4 main places of interest in it. And then everything else is just kind of like, you'll just go with the flow and kind of adapt around it and stuff. Which both have their kind of pros and cons and stuff, and their benefits and their hindrances. But I think it's really interesting because a lot of people fall into these categories, and I would class myself as the latter one, in that like when I'm planning stuff, and particularly lore, I kind of go like, okay, where do I want to go? These are my ideas that connect to that, like a web, like my first initial ideas, and I'll kind of put like large chunks out there and like string small things together to that to hit that bigger goal. And like a lot of the time it will be like where like I'll be like, okay, I know 1, 2, and 3 are going to happen, and I have them planned out, and I have lots of detail put into these 30 specific points. But like 1.5, 2.5, and like 3.5, I will have like a general idea of how I want it to go, or maybe how I envision it, and then. But like then if someone asks me a very specific question, I will literally have to just like think on my feet and go with that. And like, I wanted to do this because I think you're the other kind. I think you were like, from everything you've taught me, you seem extremely detail oriented and very, very like, this happens because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. Right.
We call that the Wizard of Oz curtain phenomenon.
Yeah. But the reason I kind of thought about it, and it's something that kind of came to me while I was watching a series of lectures on YouTube that I've kind of mentioned a lot of times in our D&D group chat. There are 2 series of lectures on YouTube by Brandon Sanderson on how to write for sci-fi and fantasy. And obviously as a DM and someone who really likes Sanderson's writing style, super interested in that, immediately clicked on it. It's basically the same course, 13 episodes, 1 hour each. Mostly taught by him, one or two guest speakers, and he covers like literally how to write a sci-fi fantasy novel, your plot, your characters, conflict, all that. Really, really good. Actually, would highly recommend it to anyone. Very easy to find as well. Just look for Brandon Sanderson lecture on YouTube, and you will get these. But in the introductory lecture for the 2020 version of the year, he mentions that there are two camps when it comes to like writers for sci-fi and fantasy. There are people he calls gardeners. And actually, he says the term gardener is actually borrowed from George R. R. Martin. That's how he describes them.
Yeah, I was thinking I've heard that before. Yeah, and it was George that I heard it from.
Yeah, and then says gardeners, and then there's the other camp of writers, which some people call discovery writers, and George R. R. Martin calls gardeners are discovery writers. In terms of like they plant a garden, let it grow, and then see where it goes. And then the other kind of writers are George R. R. Martin calls architects. And they're the people who have a full plan. They'll go out, they go in with an outline, they go exactly all along it, and they have this outline, and then they can focus on, because they have the outline, the frame already built, they can then go into very specific moments within that outline and build in between there and connect everything together. And it's a very kind of planned and structured thing, as opposed to the gardener who goes, I have 3 or 4 or 5 interesting concepts, handful of interesting characters, put them all together, and let's see how they react together and naturally kind of pan out. And
there's a very organic the gardeners have a very organic approach to it, where like if you establish 3 characters and like all you really need to do, right, is have 3 characters and then have like some sort of MacGuffin or goal that all of them want, but for different reasons. Like this guy wants this powerful thing to help save the world. This guy wants it to further the advancement of his kingdom. This guy wants it for personal gain, to kill his enemies. And instantly there you're 3 people who are like in conflict with one another because they all want the same power or the same object or whatever it is. And that's very cool because you don't have to necessarily... I do have a little bit of this where like I like to sit down and think, what do any of the characters in the given situation want from that situation? And then what will they do to get it? And then you can kind of see how the story evolves organically from there. The characters, if you know the character well enough, they will write themselves, because you'll just be like, well, they could, if I really wanted to, yeah, of course this character could run up and just stab the other character, but he's the good guy who wants to help the world, so he's not going to do that. So what would he do instead? That's like more within his alignment or whatever, you know?
Exactly. And that's actually something is really funny. He kind of makes a joke of it in like latter lectures where he's talking about like discovery. He goes gardeners or discovery writers, and he was like, how do you like start your book, and how do you plan out your book and go through it and write it, the actual process of writing it? And he was like, so with an architect, you'll have an outline, you'll have like a really detailed outline, and you will update that outline as you go along. You'll write like passages, and while you're writing, you can always refer back to your outline, so you always know where you're going, and you can write with that endpoint in mind. And he was like, if you're a gardener, you basically write the book, then you write the book again and again until you're happy with it.
Yeah, I think I can't say this for certain, and you know he might disagree with me. I think Patrick Rothfuss is a gardener in how he writes books.
One of the examples given of a gardener. He goes, George R. R. Martin is a gardener, so is Pat Rothfuss.
Yeah, which is funny because like you would think that the way Pat Rothfuss's books and George R. R. Martin's books really link back into each other almost very naturally, like it was planned.
Particularly George R. R. Martin's books. They're so complicated. Yeah,
there's so many layers to it, and so many things that have happened in the first book will have this reaction in the third book and in the fifth book, and it gets really, really convoluted. But like in such a way that like it would seem like that would have to be planned. But yeah, I know Pat Rothfuss has talked, because every time Pat Rothfuss does any sort of like stream or whatever, there's always someone in the comments who's like, so how about that third book, huh? And he's like, I'm getting there.
Did you notice the commonality between the two examples of gardeners? George R. Martin and Pat Rothfuss.
It takes so bloody long to get a book done because you end up writing one book 5 times. But like he said that there's like I think Pat mentioned in a stream he was doing something like that he was done the book. He's like, yeah, I was done it and I was quite happy with it, and I left it alone for a while, and then I came back to it again and I'm like, nah, don't do. Yeah. And he just started writing it again. Like he's written Doors of Stone, which is supposed to be his third book. He's written that like 4 or 5 times now.
Have you
and he's getting there, but
have you heard the first page of it? He read the first page on his Twitch stream.
Oh no. Is it oh, interesting.
It's on YouTube.
I assume that I have to look at that. I assume the first page revolves around Coat in the Waystone Inn.
It literally goes, there was a silence at the end. It was a silence of 3 parts.
Oh man, I got chills you just saying that now.
Yeah, it's so good. So it's a 5-minute video only, but it's so good. It's so good. And like I just, oh god, it just reminded me why I absolutely adore. Like, I don't think there's an author living today that writes with the same style as Patrick Rothfuss. Like, there's lots of things you can criticize him for, but the style that man writes with is impeccable.
I mean, I think there's some people who write well, but I don't know, they don't have a lot of, like, okay, you could make a meal, you could make a dish, right, that is perfectly healthy, is balanced, it has some meat, some veg, some side stuff, some garnish, it has all the elements it should have, but that doesn't mean that dish has to be very flavorful. But I feel like when you read Pat Rothfuss's stuff, there's a very distinct flavor to it. There's you could do everything right and you could have very interesting characters, great concepts and all that, but how you actually communicate that on the page, depending on the writer, can be, I've heard, like, I have not, you've read Tolkien, correct? I've heard Tolkien is a little bit hard to swallow because he's a little over descriptive sometimes.
He can be, and I think it's because I love what he's doing and what he is describing that it keeps my attention, because I distinctly remember in secondary school they had us read John Steinbeck, and I tried to read The Grapes of Wrath, and I distinctly remember half the first page is a description of dust clouds, and it just lost me. I got halfway through and I closed the book and I picked up Of Mice and Men and read that instead. But like with Tolkien, Tolkien and George R. Martin as well, to some, like George R. Martin will describe the doorknobs in a room, like George R. Martin is like a DM that really wants you to pay attention to everything. But like that's totally fair. Tolkien can get a little, what I find people who read the books mention to me that they don't expect or they weren't super fond of was like all the breaks for songs and poems and stuff like that. That they feel some people that I know that have read Lord of the Rings have mentioned that kind of drags it out a bit. But
that's very much to just stay on writers very briefly for a second. George R. R. Martin talks about that. Was it George R. Martin or was it Pat Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin's on the panel with him? And I think they're talking about, like, I mean, we definitely brought this up on the podcast before about incorporating their passions into their writing. Obviously, they are writers and they are fantasy writers, so that's obviously one of their passions. But George R. R. Martin really, really likes heraldry. So naturally, every single house in all of Westeros and even beyond has their own heraldry. There's a reason they have that heraldry. Like, it's not just like he's like, oh, I guess we'll put a fish on the Tullys. No, they're specifically in the Riverlands, and that's why they have a fish. There's loads of other ones, like is a House Dane or Day? They have the star.
Yeah, they have the star.
Yeah, so they have a star on their heraldry, but that's because they had a meteor fell to in their kind of like barony or whatever, their section of Westeros centuries ago, and they took that meteor and they made a sword out of it. Called the Sword of the Morning?
No, that's the title of the person who wields the sword. The sword is called Dawn.
Sword is called Dawn, and it has like the properties of Valyrian steel, but it is not Valyrian steel, which is very important distinction. But like he like they barely come up in the story at all. But he's like I want to do the heraldry for all my places all over.
I love it. I absolutely adore that as well. By the way, I absolutely adore it.
Pat Rothfuss really, really likes coins. I think he collects coins.
Yeah.
And so when you read his books, and I still don't understand, I do not understand in the slightest. But like you get through inflection that whether someone is doing well money wise or whether something is expensive. But yeah, he has like a bunch of different types of coins, and they're not just called like a 10-cent piece, a 50-cent piece, a euro, a dollar, or something like that. You know, they're called. I think he has. It's been a while since I read it, but they have all these really unique names, and some of them, and they also come in like denominations of, you'd have this type of piece, but it's either gold, silver, or copper, and so there's even tiers of it and stuff. It's a very complex money system, but it's still super, super interesting to hear about, and you can tell that he cares about that because Kvothe has this whole thing throughout the entire. Particularly the first book, but the second book as well, where he's trying to manage his money the whole time.
Yeah.
And it'll like every now and again you'll have a little bit of a check-in where Quoth is like, oh, he had a good 2 months. He's played some songs in the tavern and people really liked it. He bought some new strings for his lute, which made it sound better, so he earned even more money.
Yeah.
Now he's got this amount of money, which makes him very comfortable. And like you get like, it's weird to think like if you're, it's almost like reading someone who is writing about bookkeeping, but somehow it's still very interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the passion comes through in it.
Totally, and you can see that in Wheel of Time as well. Robert Jordan was really, really interested in cultures and different cultures and what marks them out as different, and how they express their culture and stuff like that. So you'll see with Wheel of Time, the minute they go somewhere new, they're like, this is how they dress, this is the things their culture is interested in, this is how that has impacted the people and their attitudes towards each other. Like at one point, I won't really spoil anything, but at one point they meet basically like a seafaring people, and like because they're always like on boats and it's really, really hot and warm where they are. Normally, like the men and women go topless, like, and that's just a thing in their society. It's like they're like a woman being topless and not sexualized. It's just like, it's really goddamn hot here, and we all work on ships all day out in the sea where there's very little cloud cover. So we don't cover up much. But when they come to land, they all cover up and wear different, and like wear like shawls or like wrappings around themselves and stuff like that. And they all have,
they know like mainlanders would not take to that very nicely.
Exactly. And like there is a whole thing from a certain character's point of view where like they've had a very like almost like prim and proper upbringing because they're of like noble birth, and then they go onto a ship and they see like how the women on the ship act and how they like just act like they're treated no different from I think they're not treated very differently from the men. The women are in charge. They're like, and like they go and they just and they go topless just because they're out in the sea, and it's so funny just to see someone be like, ah! in character. And like there's another one they do like the Aiel are extremely well fleshed out in Wheel of Time, and they have a whole thing of like the Aiel are the warrior society that you see a flashback of in the cold open of the final episode.
They wear like the head wraps, and they wear like whites and beige colors, I think.
Yeah, they wear colors to blend in with the terrain of where they come from. Like they're all like expertly martially trained, like men and women alike. They're all divided into septs and sectums. Like he goes into crazy detail.
There was a scene there.
Oh.
I won't spoil it basically, but like if you watch that opening scene in that episode, it really conveys to you exactly why these people are such insane warriors. Like why the state this person is fighting in is like, wow, holy hell, you're still fighting. That's the fact that you're able to keep that up, like, is insane. You know, it's incredible.
That actually comes up again as a very interesting point in latter books, which I'm sure, I hope it'll come up in latter seasons of the Wheel of Time. It's actually a really interesting point that person was in that condition while they were in the battle. It's cool. But anyway, the reason I bring up why like writers include their like passions and stuff in their book is like a good thing to take note of when you're prepping for D&D sessions. Write your strengths, write to the things you're passionate about, things you know a lot about, the things you can like put your own personal spin and flavor on it and that's where it comes down to like knowing your DM style and then that influencing your prep style. So like I would consider myself to be more of a gardener, particularly in just in terms of like how I flesh stuff out, and like I look much more at like the big picture and where things are going, and like I don't really like if I sit down to write a session. Actually, I like wrote out some bullet points of how I actually prep it. I can actually show you because the notebook I wrote the notes for today is the thing, and is actually my DM notebook. Let me find the note session and I can show you. I can kind of show you how I prep. Yeah, cool. So
describe it very thoroughly for our audio listeners.
I will. I'm gonna use the visual aids for YouTube, but I will absolutely describe it. So can you kind of see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, for our audio listeners, I got my DM notebook here, and what I have is this week's session, and then I have at the very top is session type, exploration / lore finding, general setup. So at the moment, this is from when my group are going through. They're still going through a series of sky castles. They're in the 6th castle. So I have Castle 6, strategic / scientific division, and then I have rooms, and I have a rough sketch of what it looks like from an aerial view there. So it's like it's an octagonal shape. This is like the ground floor they go into. It's octagonal shaped. It's got 4 floors down, and there's a statue on the bottom floor. Two side. This is where they entered from. It's like a TP circle into a hallway into the room. Then on this side there was like an observatory portion of this castle, literally like a giant telescope that was coming out of the castle. And this side then was a personal library. So I sketched it out just so I could do it. And like I didn't have like very much details of like either the library or the observatory like written down. I just had like my mental picture of them. And with the library, I think I had like 2 or 3 books I wanted to put in there specifically if they looked for stuff to foreshadow what was they were going to find later in the castle. And so I like stuff about like I think it's stuff about like engineering and stuff about like the giant war. And then in the observatory I had like star maps and other things that were kind of hinting at stuff that would come up later again that actually came up this session, and finally they guys made the connection. It was aliens, it was Mindflayers. But yeah, then I have like floor 2. It's like war room, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 bullet points, and they're literally like, this is literally just like the most like streamlined description I can think of. There are bullet points for me to improvise over. So it's like remains of a giant-sized table. Ceiling is a mosaic of Anum, which is the prime deity in the giant pantheon. Anum in the center, with each of the giant types kneeling to him in fealty. Wrought iron chandelier, map of Musfell, missing Frostguard, Navguard, Bastion, and Fengard, indicating it's an old map. Map is marked with various known enemy positions. Navguard is marked as Aradan's stronghold. So that's a particularly important NPC. And then the next room then down I have is the 3rd floor, Arcana Forge, and this is one where I was like hinting at stuff, where I could hint at stuff to come by like stuff I placed in the room. Again, giant-sized anvil with broken hammers, various beakers and instruments, huge iron ingots, DC 20 investigation check, chest buried in the rubble from hole punched in the wall, 2 medium-sized ingots of storm steel, inherent 1d4 lightning, just to remind myself what it was. And then this is where I started hinting at stuff to come in. Blueprints on the wall of Viking longship style skyship / chariot combos, intended to be pulled by one of the Sky Swimmers, which is a creature they first fought when they got into this series of adventures. And then
they're from Ravnica, aren't they?
Yes, they're awesome, and I love them. They're crazy. And then unfinished headplate of a Sky Swimmer. So in my world, rather than Sky Swimmers being creations of Ravnica, they're creations of this particular faction of Storm Giants who've gone a more technological route. And they're like biologically engineering weapons to attack the rest of the world. But like that's I think is probably, oh actually I have another one then. So this then is just like a rough diagram I drew of the next area they were going into.
Oh.
And so it's
you do a lot of really nice diagrams and illustrations in your notes. That's very good.
It's just because like it's sometimes I really like doing like descriptive stuff. I think it's one of the things I'm good at. So I will put like a lot of effort into like my descriptions to really set an image, because I want to replicate what I saw in my mind when I first saw the plot device, and then maybe elaborate on that a little more to fully flesh it out. So like when I'm thinking of that, sometimes at the time when I'm writing notes, I can't really pull together the verbiage that I want to when I'm trying to like describe like maybe like a specific piece of prose, like they've entered a new area and I want to write a description, but either like I'm tired or just I'm having writer's block and it's not coming to me. What I will do then is like sketch out something like this, so I still at least have the basic shape of it. For audio listeners, this is it's like a sub basement of the castle that they were in of the last place we were discussing. It's a place they discovered after they solved the puzzle. This is actually a separate session from the last one that we were talking about, but it's basically they come into an octagonal room. Everything was octagonal in this castle because it like I was kind of doing the thing where like in Norse mythology 9 was a sacred number, so I was like, oh, for them I'll make like 8 a sacred number and make like all the things 8-sided, and it was kind of like a unique feature as well. But it's like an octagonal room that leads with a hallway that leads to another octagonal room that has 2 hallways that go off it and leads to sort of a crescent shaped room that then has a lift, an elevator for our non-Irish people, that descends down into like a science lab. And I have like 3 or 4 tests. I have like 6 test tubes drawn out with some connector stuff beside it, and then inside it I have bits. Oh yeah, I have notes written down. So I have these are like various test tubes of like, it was in the vivisection area, so it's like chunks from experiments. So I've Behir bits, armored tentacles, large eye with a metal rune grafted onto it. Sorry, trying to read my own writing there when I was writing really small. But yeah, that's kind of, oh yeah, and then like up here I have like a directory written for myself as well for the area. So I have sections marked. So this is A, B, and then C is down here. So I actually have more drawn there again. That's a door they had to get through at the end. But yeah, so I have A is vestibule, B is the carrion forge. So that was the area with all the test tubes and stuff. And then I see is Vivisection Live Storage, and that was the big bolted gate that they get through to get into the next area. But that's kind of how I set up for my sessions. I'll also ask myself questions. I'll be like, what's the purpose of this session? And then I'll answer that. Like, I literally write, like, what is the purpose of today's session? And then I'll answer that question. And then I'll be like, and then I'll kind of like think about, what are my guys doing? What do they want to do? Is there anything that they currently have like in the background tipping away that I can maybe hint at and try? Because like I like to, because so many of my arcs will be centered on like one character's story or an element from one character's story. That's kind of all I've really done at the moment. They haven't really had a lot of just general arcs because they've mostly been drawn towards, I think we've had one, which is the pirate arc, and because Mike just really likes pirates, and otherwise they've kind of been drawn to stuff that is specifically centered on their own kind of plot lines. And I have put other like general plot lines in there. They're just kind of not bitten at them, which, you know, I get to advance them and have more fun when they eventually come back around to them. But I try to keep in mind what is kind of I've hinted at for them, and maybe put like one or two smaller hints, like little things that at the time they won't notice, but when the big reveal of whatever their thing is comes back, if they think about it, the connection can be made. I like to foreshadow a lot for some reason. I just really like it. I really like the moment when a player figures something out. I saw it actually because like when I was hinting at I was trying to hint at Mindflayers in a recent thing, because I was like, there's 3 creatures in stasis pods. These are their brainwave activities. You can see they're quite low at the moment and all this kind of stuff. And then like I could just see because we're all on video chat. I could see my player Steve. He was like looking like this, and he went, and he like mouthed the word aliens really obviously, and I was like, yes, because they're basically aliens. But yeah, that's kind of how I set it up. I like I'll sometimes draw diagrams. I'll do, like I said, like I'll do like a breakdown floor by floor, and have like very small little bullet points. But then in terms of like what's actually in there and the structure and how it goes, a lot of that I will just roll with the players on, because I'll have the bits that are important, and those bits are set in stone and cemented, and like things that the important things where they can get lore or story progression or items or whatever the hell we need to do in this session. I'd have them set like stakes, and then I'll string the plot along through that.
Interesting. Two things. One, your style is very different from mine.
I thought it would be.
Yeah, it like you have a. What I like about yours is it's very structured. It has a very clear.
I did think I was a gardener, but now after looking at how I prep, I think I might be an architect.
But I think, I think maybe because you have like you said, you have a thing at the start of your. Or at your notes, like what is the goal of this session?
Yeah.
Well, first actually, you put down a type of session that it is. Is this exploration? Is it combat? Is it dungeon crawling?
That's been a recent addition. I didn't used to do it, but I find it helps me get into the mind of what challenges I want to set for people.
That's good. That's a good idea. I like that.
I am a architect, aren't I?
I think you are an architect.
God damn it.
So yeah, you set that in place, and then you have your diagrams and your maps fully like fleshed out and stuff like that. And then you also have like
rough. They're rough, I'd say.
Oh, I think everyone ad libs on the fly for certain things. If you decide, if a player comes to you and you're like, oh, there's a doorway up ahead, and they're like, and you said there's no way to open it, and they're like, oh, well, surely there must be a lever or something, and you think, well, yeah, that'd have to be, because how else would the door guy get through this door?
I've done that a lot.
Yeah, so then you're like, oh, I mean, yes, there is a lever, and it's on your right.
Yeah.
So I mean, we do that as DMs an awful lot. One thing I want to check with you is, did you say Carrion Forge?
Carrion Forge, yeah.
That's it's so good. It's so good. Anyway, okay, sorry. That reminds me of like Castlevania.
Yeah, I was trying to hit that like Doom 2016 feeling where it's like science and demons and biological, like biomechanical exploration.
What was your name? What was your name in Castlevania in the show?
Oh, Isaac.
The hammer. Isaac, yeah. Oh, I love that he had this metal table that was the anvil.
Yeah.
With the hammer,
so
and all when he's forging, you can hear the ringing of the hammer through the entire castle.
Sparks the entire time as well.
Yeah.
I did love.
So
Isaac is.
Isaac's
the guy with the knife, isn't he?
Hey, it's a H. Hector.
Yes.
It's been a while. I'm going to rewatch it soon. It's a really good show.
Oh, dude, it's like that and Arcane are the 2 best video game adaptations ever.
Oh yeah. I think someone was saying, we won't get too into it, but someone was saying like recently that there might be other video game adaptations coming down the line.
That was me. The studio who did Castlevania have said they're working on a Devil May Cry anime, and that would literally make me weep tears of happiness. Like
Yes,
Legend of
in case you guys don't
Korra
know.
is like that close to doing that, but I swear to God, if they make it Devil May Cry anime to the level of Castlevania, I will openly weep every time I watch it.
Uh, yeah, I like your style an awful lot. It's like what I like is you clearly have a direction you're going. It's very structured.
How
I
did I think I was a gardener?
no, with everything you were kind of describing there, I think you were. This is good. We're having open discussion about it. And we're learning things about our.
Yeah.
No,
I
I
guess
very
I'm
much
just a
think you
shitty
are.
architect.
I mean, look. I mean, it's very much like
Yeah.
it's the worst answer, and it's a really boring answer. But if you were to ask, I think, well, you know, whenever you ask someone like, "Oh, do you like railroad? Do you like to of an open world kind of thing for your dungeon mastering?" 90% of the comments you'll see on any video or post online about that will be like, "I like to do a mix of both." In reality,
Yeah.
most people do. It's just the degree in which you do that mix is you know, your own style.
And that is actually a point Brandon Sanderson makes in those lectures. Is he said good authors will pull the best techniques from both styles, even though they might be hardcore one. Like George R. R. Martin is a gardener, but clearly he has some kind of plan. I can't remember which author it is. He mentions a specific author because someone in his class goes, "Look, I'm a discovery writer. When it comes to plotting, is there anything I can do like what do I do?" Like I think he actually calls hilariously. I think in that lecture he actually calls discovery writers pantsers because you fly by the seat of your pants.
Oh yeah.
And like the woman who asked him this just asked her, you know, like, "Do you have any tips? Because other than just like write a lot," and he was like, "You're going to write the book, and you're probably going to write the book a couple times, and then you'll probably be unhappy with what you've written, and then you'll probably rewrite the book one more time, and then you'll probably send it to try and be published." And he was like, "Okay." He goes, but he mentions a specific writer, and he goes, "He is very much a discovery writer, but what he does is he will have an outline, like a general outline. It won't have everything in it, but it'll be like the things he wants to hit, basically like bullet points that he can then improvise all over of and really put his own style into." And like I think that's like exactly what you're saying. Just like pull the best bits that suit you, and it feels kind of crappy to be like, "Do what suits you," and something where we're kind of framing as like an advice episode. But yeah, it is about like try everything, keep what works for you. It's very like Bruce Lee's whole philosophy of keep what works and throw away the rest.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I feel like, again, this, if someone asks you which one are you, and you say I'm a bit of both, that's a boring answer. But it's an accurate one because I think most people are. No one is 100% the other. There's going to be certain points where the architects are going to have everything planned out, and then in the moment they think, "Oh, well, maybe actually this character would do this thing instead," and they're improvising on their own stuff, and they'll run with it. But then likewise, if you're, I think if you're the gardener, you're going to you're not going to just walk into the session with virtually no notes. You're going to have some rough outline. You're going to be like, at the very least, I have my characters at A to get to B, and in between there's probably some orcs or something. Why not? And even if that loosely up arc quest you're doing is still an architect trait, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like a spectrum where along that spectrum to appear, or whether you lean more. I do think you have certain traits of a gardener, but yeah, I think based on the notes you showed me there, and this you know what this is? This is a man who did an English degree in college.
This is a man who did a history degree in college.
My apologies, a history degree.
No, I did both, but like that's how you write a history essay, or at least as I was taught in school was you go, this is my essay title, this is the argument I'm going to be making, and this is the argument I'm making. This is the argument I make in each paragraph. This is my evidence for my argument. And then I go, now that I've showed you my evidence for my argument, this is why I'm right. And then you go, and now this is where I continue that into the next paragraph. And I think that has always just stuck with me. And that's really not a bad approach to it. Obviously, like I think, I mean, like this is the title of my session. When you do always write titles, even in like my game, titles. And I've called you out as being the best note taker of any D&D game I've seen thus far. So you will be like, this is the title of it. This is like, if you're writing your notes, you'll be like, this is what I roughly want to accomplish this session. Here's the steps and how the party can accomplish it. And then at the end you're like, you would probably put down like at the end, because they've accomplished that, they never get these words or something as well. Yeah,
you know?
I will say like the only thing I actually like word for word script when I DM will either be like really big moments that I want to hit, I want a very specific feeling or flavor for. Like Whereas I'm just flicking through recent sessions because I know I did a lot of visions for my sorcerer recently. 1 second, and it's like to give an example of how I like script stuff.
I like how you entered this podcast, Martin,
I
with the
full on
notion
thought
that you were a gardener and you turned out you might be an architect. And
I
you
thought
think I'm an architect, and I'll tell you right now, I'm definitely a gardener.
I really, because like I was like, there's so much detail in Conor's notes, and I just kind of like, we're like 35 minutes, and I just kind of bullshit my way through a lot of times, going by what instinctually how I feel and what I think would be cool. Okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think inherently to be any sort of DM, you need to be some part a gardener.
Yeah.
That you're like, it may like what like in this moment, I wasn't like the players went this way instead of the other way, and now they're with this character, and you thought that character actually. But if they're with this character now, that character, because it's a living world, it's not something you plan. It's a living world. Like if you're writing a book, you get to decide whether or not this character accompanies the protagonist on this quest or whatever. But in the game, like if you're playing a game with other people that you don't control, one of your players might be like, no, don't bring that guy, he's works with these guys, I don't trust him, so leave him behind. And you might be thinking, oh, I was kind of planning that he needed to be there for this thing, so what happens now? And you have to pull some garden or some improv stuff and kind of do it on the fly. Like
the session I planned that was going to be like, we've talked about it before. It's the one where it's the reason I invented shark racing. But the session I planned that was going to be, that I thought would be a like surveillance, follow, track a guy, intimidate him kind of idea for a storyline.
Was it grab and interrogate?
Well, was it kidnapping and murder?
Murder and then like cannibalism, because your druid turned into a shark and then the remains of the guys
our moon druid who's no longer a part of the party, she turned into a shark and ate him alive.
Yeah.
Which was
so good.
You know
I mean, that honestly, that's just prime D&D. That is delicious prime D&D. Served medium rare, just with a side of pepper sauce and some fries. That is prime D&D.
I thoroughly love my party because they do stuff like that all the time, but it never upsets me. It just makes me laugh really hard.
Yeah.
But anyway, an example of stuff that I like word for word script. So these are like 2 visions that I gave my sorcerer after specific points in this arc where they were going from point A to point B, and at point B there was a boss fight. So immediately after the fight, I actually had to switch up the order of these actually. So I had planned the first one to be immediately after the fight with the boss, and then the second one immediately after a different fight, and the second one they got a list of the giant leaders' injuries, like a medical report after they fought this guy Aradon Stormwreath is one of his name. Gale Speaker, that's it. Gale Speaker, who like defeated him in the old days, and it was like 75% of the bones in his body were broken, missing an eye, missing a jawbone, all this kind of stuff. I'll do that one actually. I'll just do the one. But so after hearing the list of injuries, she got this vision. You can see through only one eye. Blood and dirt clump the other closed. The pain in your eye pulses with the pounding of your own blood. The storm around is diminished to a heavy rain. Static crackles around your head and shoulders, occasionally flaring into errant blue sparks. Arms strained and weary, breath ragged, and stomach in revolt. Slumped to his knees before you is an enormous storm giant, missing an eye, clutching his ribs on one side, left arm bent at an awkward angle, and spitting blood into the snow. You see your arm reach forward, a human arm. In a pulse and a flash, suddenly scales erupt across the arm, its size swelling and growing. You continue to grow with it until you are now observing him from an above angle. You see the arm reach out, a claw hooking under the chin into the jawbone, and you see your arm flex and tense before you tear the jaw free, blood scattering amongst the snow. You see your head reel back. You feel your head reel back and your jaws open as a flash of blue energy begins to spark between your teeth. Oh, god damn it! I improvised this last bit. Crap. But basically, they see themselves becoming an ancient bronze dragon, open their jaws, and breath weapon this giant off the side of a mountain. I improvised the last bit. But the first 3 quarters where it actually sounded like I was talking about, that's what I wrote down.
Okay.
Do you want to just go now?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what my style is.
Please do, because I'm very interested.
Okay, so I am 100. I'm so much a gardener, man. I'm eating dirt like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm so much of a gardener. You've no idea.
Conor O'Brien 2020. Jesus, I went back 2 years. 2022. Holy shit.
Time means nothing anymore.
Nope.
Time means nothing. Never will again. Let's do the time warp. No, okay, never mind. Rocky Horror. Anyway, so okay.
I will do that when I'm not being recorded.
So my structure is that I literally only recently started doing, because we're 87 sessions this campaign, and it's getting to the point where I used to only like do every like few campaigns. I would name something to give myself almost like a milestone on where we are, because I realized the further into the campaign I was getting, I needed to go back. So one, I don't write my notes. I type them all up on Google Docs.
I used to do that, but I found this got the juices flowing better when I was trying to write.
Yeah, honestly, that I might try and do some more written stuff like that. But I keep all my Google Docs. I name them all. I actually have them done like their episodes. I have C2S87, so it's awesome. Campaign 2 session 8. And I started naming them recently again because I tend to go back and reference old stuff. We're so far in now that the stuff that has happened already is really really relevant. I will go back and I will do it. I used to only do it like boss fight this or post downtime 2 and stuff like that. So and I know where in the timeline stuff happens, so I can roughly judge it from there. But I started doing it. So this is session 87, the Dwarven Monastery. This is a recent one you guys played.
Yes. Very fun.
The very first thing I do, well, mostly, I forget about 20% of the time. The very first thing I do is I write my intro, because I do an intro at the start of every session to recap for everyone what happened. In campaign 1, I used to just ad-lib this. And then there was a point in campaign 1 where I would roll like a D6 and I would point at the person whose number that was, and I would go, right, and I got this idea from Matt Cole, because I get most ideas from Matt Cole.
Not a bad place to get ideas from.
No, the man's full of good ideas. And I'd be like, I'd go, that's a 3, 1, 2, 3. Martin, tell us what happened last session. And then Matt had a very good point in that if you do that with people, that gives you a way to see what was important to them. Because they'll be like, oh, we did this thing, and we talked to this person. Oh, and we found this door that we couldn't open that was like made of metal and stuff. And then you as a DM will be like, oh, that door, and it was closed and unable to open because I didn't have anything behind it. But clearly that means something to the player. So it tactic. But also I found that some people at the table weren't as good at recounting as others, and some people also didn't like being put on the spot like that, so we stopped doing that after a while. In campaign 2, you people might know that I'm a really big fan of the Legend of Korra. Yes. So I do a Legend of Korra style intro where I play my character Balthazar, who is a guy I played in like a handful of like, actually I only played him for one session. I put a lot of character. He was a replacement character after my monk died. He's a wizard, a half-elf wizard. But despite being a wizard, he's an illusionist. He so desperately wants to be a magician and entertain people. So he has all these mad illusions, really, really, and his father's like, you're a very powerful wizard, do something with that and get a real job. And he's like, no, Dad, I'm going to be an entertainer.
You're made Will Arnett from Arrested Development.
I full on like, when I first introduced him after my character has died.
Jed?
Job.
Job, that's it. Jesus, yeah, Job.
When I first introduced him after my character died, I did it in the very next session. All the other people in the party were having a funeral for my character. And Balthazar showed up as the funeral magician, because celebrations of things have magicians. And I full on took out my phone and I played the final down theme, and I stood up at the table flinging my arms around, and Balthazar has a voice and he sounds a little but I was going for something a little bit like Korra season 2.
Is that like 1920s newsy kind of voice?
Yeah, like Varric in Korra. So like, for example, I have an intro here, a bit of it. I always start off with when last we left our hero.
Before you do, you're cutting out a little bit.
Am I?
Sorry. Check your mic.
I was trying to eat the microphone a little more.
Sorry, folks.
So I have an intro here. I'll read a little bit of this in the voice I do. I'm not a professional voice actor, so it's not perfect, and I usually tend to make mistakes because I write it and I never proofread it and I never practice. So I write it and I think that sounds good enough, and then I'll read it and I'll make it to 6. So I go, when last we left our heroes, they awoke in the stone giant settlement high in the Gothfell Peak. Before continuing their journey, Lug was awarded 3 leaf stones from the stone giant Tyrnov in thanks for the rescue of his daughter. Exiting down the winding giant-sized stairway, the party headed further east towards the dwarven monastery village of Clusterdan. And I'll do every episode intro, every session intro like that, and then I'll always finish at the very end. Did you just do a bit more,
I did. That's our customary celebration when Conor finishes the intro. We do meme sounds at him for about 30 seconds.
Yeah. And then at the end, so I'll do all the recap like that, and then at the end of the last one, at the end of the intro, then I usually ask 3 questions. So on this one, it's why are the quakes becoming more and more frequent? Will Lucas de Valkyos take the party have sent him? And will Wabu be able to keep such a powerful artifact misuse it? All that and more right now on Asteria. Because Asteria is the world.
That's literally what we do to him every single session. I don't know why he still agrees to DM for us.
So I do that to like I think pumped and I usually throw in a couple of jokes. There's a couple of times where, like, because Balthazar is a real person, by the way, in the world, so it's weird that he's narrating this. I don't know why. I don't understand the lore or the canon of that. But because I mean, like, you guys did a broom race in the city of Temerai like months ago.
I love that.
That broom race was great. But like, you did that, and Balthazar was the announcer for the race. But he has no idea who you are in the game. But he still talks about your story in this way the whole time. So we do that. I ask the questions. I say all that and more right now on Asteria. And then we just we get into it. So I always do my intro first. I think the intro is good to get people hyped. It is a little cumbersome. I do forget it sometimes. I've done a couple where like we've done like breaks for like a few weeks where we missed a couple of months for X, Y, and Z reason. And it's full on like Balthazar, like last time on. Wait, are we doing an episode today? Okay, fair enough. I guess we're here. I'm still getting paid, right? And he's like, doing a whole kind of a meta thing, like he's in a recording studio.
Yeah. It's very fun.
It is very fun. That's how I usually start every single one, and I've done that since I started. Quite. I'll probably keep it going. It is a little cumbersome, and I tend to write them too long sometimes, but if loads of stuff happen. But anyway, next thing I do, I have a title, a subheading, Active Quest. This I started doing over the past couple kind of quest arcs. It is a summary. It's not even notes what's happening right now. It's a summary of what is happening within the quest. So this is why I know I'm a gardener. There's nothing here pertaining specifically to this session or even the last session you did. This is an overarch like this. I would have this written. Arrive in town. In this one, I have stuff about the Marquis in Basteau and stuff like that. I talk about what's going on, who's working with who's got beef with someone else, all the different interconnecting kind of stuff. And that's an overview of everything. Then I have a subsection, which I started doing again for the last few months, which is called Motivations. And I will list the major players, and I will write down what do they want to accomplish, what's important to them. Let me see here. Yeah, I think I can tell you these two for Marquis Nickel Durant without giving anything away, because I'm pretty sure you guys have a fairly good what he's about anyway. So, motivations, Marquis Nickel Durant, who's the Marquis of the city, number one, wants to sustain a reputation of his city by keeping the mines running at any cost. And 2, wants the Empire to recognize his capability as a ruler so that he can continue to govern Basteau even after the Empire. These are his motivations. These are the things he wants. He wants to keep his city running, his people happy, all the gears turning, everyone gets to keep working, business keeps flowing, all that kind of stuff. So they're his motivations. And every time I'm faced with, and again, this is where you have the seed, and then every time then when I'm faced with a choice for him, I think if I'm a guy like that, and I want nothing more than to keep my city happy, my people safe, everything running, what do I do? And he makes that choice then based on that decision. And sometimes it can be, it can be the extremes of things. He can go quite far with that. I did say he will keep the mines running in his city operational at any cost. So maybe there is an upper limit on that, but so I think, and then I have other characters that are in it as well. Previously, there was a dragon named Givarel, the steel-clad serpent. I also had Giverel. Giverel is not in this one because Giverel is now dead at this point. But I had Giverel there, and I'm like, what does Giverel want? Well, Giverel wants to maintain their deal with the Marquis, where they don't attack the city as long as the Marquis keeps giving them precious metals, because they eat precious metals. It's like a delicacy for them. And that's their motivation. They want to maintain that, and they want to maintain their domain, their hold over this area, you know. So these are the kind of things I write down. And again, I think it's very much a Gardner technique, where I'm like, I know what the character is, and then basically, as long as I have this little cheat sheet, I can filter any new information coming in through that, and then I know how that character will react. Next up, I do the date. This one is marked as the 2nd of Fienda. Actually, that's not right. It's actually marked as the 2nd. It's because it was the first, and what I do is I always copy and paste, change what and then for the next session, rather than writing it all out again. Obviously, I just deleted 1 and put in 2, and that's not correct. I'll put in the year, the month, the date. I have some stuff here about the giant settlement. I have some characters. I'll often put in characters here as well. So I'll be like, monastery leadership, Master Richter, old hill dwarf, olive skin, long white beard tucked into the front of his coat, wrinkled face, at a stage in his life where he has definitely started to shrink but hasn't lost any of it. I'll know. And usually I don't always put in the personality traits for people like him. I actually don't have motivations for Richter, but Richter is very much like, he's doing what he's happy with. He's in the monastery, he's living his life, he's got students and acolytes that he is like training, so he's very much in a happy place. Then I will put down like some additional parts, which will be like, it's usually bullet points. I will put down kind of some things you will encounter, particularly if you guys are on a journey or going through a dungeon. I will have the points you will hit as you travel through that land or that dungeon, in order, and then I can kind of jump back and forth if I need to. And honestly, at the end I have additional quests. You guys will usually be on a main quest at the time. My additional quest is like other things that are ticking away in the background. I actually do have one here that is Sheriff Rosalind not returned from Basto. And then I have a handful of notes there related to that. Very light. I just mentioned like that Connaught is there, and Dia is looking for her and stuff like that. I have a handful of some stuff about here about the Venatoria Obscura. That's my additional quest. I'll always have something just decide to go, hey, let's go check out that other thing that we haven't talked about in 4 weeks. And then we'll see what the story is there. And I don't have to like go back 4 weeks worth of notes. I have some stuff I can work off of. Then after that I have, but again, this is all like very light stuff. There's nothing very in depth. I just need to be able to give myself a refresher, and then I can run with it after that and do a lot of improv. And then at the end I have additional notes. This is usually characters. So I have descriptions of Christophe, Lucien, Princess Eveline Renoir, and oh yes, I don't think you know that person yet. Never mind.
No, please continue.
So that's kind of the structure I've been doing for a while now. Again, I'll have step-by-step stuff if I know for definite. Here's my thing, right? I have a planning session. I learned early on, and I've said this before on the podcast, if you're a dungeon master and you design a dungeon and you come to an intersection and there's like, you can go left, right, or straight ahead. What do you want to do, players? Your players will find a way to go straight up through the ceiling, and it will make sense, and you'll have to roll with it. Your players will always find a way one direction you were not planning. So rather than me spending a crazy amount of time trying to plan out all the possibilities, I will instead get a very general concept of the world or the area in, like for example, if I know that in that sense, right, you go behind the waterfall and back a bit, and then you're at that intersection, and I'm like, do you want to go left, right, or center? And then someone's like, I want to go straight up with this amazing drill magic item that I have. I'll be like, okay, that's fair enough. I'll think to myself,
like you're in Lagan style, just
yeah, and I'll be like, sorry, so how does that work? and then I'll think to myself, right, well, they just went under a recently, like the waterfall's probably only 20 feet above them, through that stone. So I will let them do that, and then the water will pour down into it, and it will wash them back out of the cave, or something like that will happen. But I'm very much I'm very much a reactive DM, where like I'll know my world in a general sense and my characters well enough that if something happens, I know how X, Y, and Z person will feel or react about that. I also know like if you're in an area where like it's Temurai, for example, the spell guard, who are the guards of Temurai, if you do something wrong, they'll try to act. They're police. They will try to arrest you. They're not in the interest of murdering people on the spot. However, if you're in like some other place that is like run by a more militaristic or aggressive people, and you try to steal something, they might be like, "Oh, we just murder thieves here, so get ready." But I'll know the world and I'll know how people want to react. So that is exactly why I'm a gardener. Yeah, there is. I rely very heavily on improv, and This is where I give you a peek behind the curtain, Mark. Okay. This is where you find out that the wizard is actually just an old man. All right. Because so we had. I don't think I told you this already. No, I didn't. No. We've had a few sessions now where you guys have been Gothfell peaks, which are. They're literally, all these peaks are just chunks of stone that fell off of the crumbled body of a 1,000-foot tall titan that collapsed and spread across the land. And that titan was named Tyr, hence why it's called the Gothfell Peaks, as in God, Goth, Fell, Fallen. You know, I also put an unnecessary amount of like planning into why things are named the way they are in my world. Like
See, that's why I thought you were you were an architect and I was a gardener, because I don't do that. I go, what name do I want? That Luke.
See, I'm very picky about names though. So like for example, here I have this is some notes I took last week. These are names of the rings of Dominion. So in my world there are 4 elven queens, one for each type of elf. And they each had 1 ring of dominion, which helped them conquer that element, and then they could like rein it in and control it to build their empires. I probably spent about an hour and a half coming up with 8 names, because I know in my world, Earth Elves, which are like my drow, but I call them Earth Elves. Earth Elves are much more. They're kind of Indian in how things sound and how like the way. And then I know. Sorry.
Yeah, your audio didn't come through there for a sec. Yeah, you were saying about in terms of how things sound.
Yeah, so I know that Earth Elves sound very like Indian or Hindi in the types of sounds and the individual syllables that would make up words in the language. Hindi would kind of come through if you're listening to someone speak in like an Earth Elf dialect or the names of things an Earth Elf would have. Fire is kind of similar, but both of them have a very small. They have like maybe a 20% kind of like Welsh kind of thing thrown in there. Air is way more Welsh with only a little bit of Hindi in it, as is water. It's way more Welsh, a little bit of Hindi, but also all the underwater races of my worlds, like Water and Triton, are Grecian.
Oh, cool.
So there's just a little bit of Grecian thrown in there, just proximity. So like I had multiple tabs open. I was like English to Hindi, English to Welsh, English to Greek. And I went through that and I planned it out. And I was like typing in words like, what is fire, those languages for the fire ring? What is like ember? What is burn? What is scald, cinder, stuff like that. And I did that. And then I was like, okay, ring. What is the word ring in these languages? What is the word control? What is the word this? And then I would just pick syllables, mash them together, pick out in letters and put new letters in, and try to make them look like they make sense in the language. In the end, I came up with names I'm pretty happy with, but it took a really, really long time. The only real benefit I have is that if you were to read out these names, I think they would sound like they're from that culture.
Okay.
You know, that's the only benefit, and it only really benefits me. I could call them anything, and I think you guys. That sounds great. The queen's name is Sharon. Whatever, it's fine.
SHARN.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like
No, Charn. Yeah, Sharon.
but yeah, so I do that. It consumes way too much time, but I'm really really picky with names, particularly places. I spend a lot like I'll spend a lot of time drawing a map, but I usually know where things are and where I want to lay it out. But the thing that takes me the longest in drawing a map is naming places, because I want to know that the name means something to this area. I'm not just going to call something the Dunland, hills or something like that. I want to know, what does Dun mean? Is land short for land? Is that, and then what culture gave it that name and so on. Yeah, so I think I'm an architect, but I'm very much a gardener when it comes to the rest of it. Sorry, I was going to tell you something about what peek behind the curtain, and that was not at all it.
Okay. Please.
I got a bit distracted.
You have my attention, sir.
Yes. So we are doing this quest. You're going through the mountains. You had about 3 or 4 sessions up in the mountains and kind of traveling through them, and then eventually getting to the Dwarven Monastery. There was a session in the middle where you guys had just fled Basto.
Yeah.
You're up in the mountains. I had done a little bit of prep work and a bit of an outline for some stuff that we could do. And then we started a session, and you guys were like, cool, do you want to go to that Dwarven Monastery? And I was like, fuck, I got nothing here. So that there was a session where you guys met some stone giants. Mm-hmm. You told the giants you killed a dragon, and they were like, oh shit, you guys are actually pretty talented. Here, can you go get my daughter back? She's after joining up with these people. They're kind of giants, but they're in some some awkward kind of bad stuff. Can you get her to come home? And then you went and found her, and she was like, yeah, no, I'm in way over my head. I'll definitely come with you. And then you got caught by the guys she was hanging out with. And you decided, I believe your words were, show me your leader and I'll break him over my shield.
Those were my exact words, yeah.
Which is great. I love it. So good. So you did that, and then you had a one-on-one where you cast your giant, what's it called? Giant Smite?
Giant Smite, yeah.
Yeah, which is your ability from being a rune knight. So you became size large. At the same time that was happening, Dan messaged me and was like, as soon as he turns big, I'm also casting a large on him. And I'm like, oh my god. So you instantly became a size huge. You were bigger than the guy you were fighting, who was this Etten, who had like stone armor and just like huge fists. And then you, in like the first round was kind of a bit hairy. The second round was fairly balanced, and you annihilated him in the third round. Then you brought him back, the young giant girl, who was still about she's like 12 feet tall. She's only meant to be like 14 comparatively, but like she's like 12 feet tall. And then you brought her home, and her parents were like, you can stay here for a night, and in the morning you got a prize and stuff like that. I improv that whole session.
Oh, really?
I had nothing planned, and I'm like, I have nothing here. And then I think at some point you guys were flying and traveling along, and someone said, do we see anything as we travel? And I'm like, you see a stone giant settlement. And then you're like, let's go check it out. And I'm like, okay, what would stone giants want? And then I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was a pantser. And I improv that whole session.
Full credit to you, man. That absolutely seemed like a planned session.
No, not at all. But again, I know my world really, really well. Yeah. So I know Balor, who is the head of the King of the Fomorians. I know he's probably recruiting in these mountains because there's a lot of giants here. So it only makes sense that maybe someone got recruited. I thought, what if it's this guy's daughter, but she's too young, so she's not a bad person. Completely winged the whole thing. But again, I think that's a very gardener thing. Not to not make notes. Definitely write notes if you can write notes. I tend to get distracted very easily, and I don't do good notes. But I think if you're a gardener and you know what you've planted, and you know where all your carrots are here, all your turnips are here, where everything is, and you have it all cordoned off into nice plots. I'm getting the metaphor's getting ahead of me. The point is, if you know what you're doing, if you know your world and the characters and things work and how places interact with one another, it makes it really easy when you get caught off guard and the players are like, let's go do this thing that the DM never planned for. And then you can be like, well, I know X, Y, and Z. I extrapolate a whole session.
Yeah, no, I'm legitimately impressed. Not for a single second did I think that was an improv session. I full on assumed that you had fully planned that.
Nope. There's been a good few times, particularly in campaign one. I was much worse at it in campaign, or worse, better. I don't know. I had to make up whole sessions on the fly more, in campaign one, and that was mostly out of my own lack of planning. But yeah, just I'd sit down. You guys were like, there's sometimes where like someone will be like, "Hey, is there this thing in this town?" And I'll be like, "Yes," and then I make a whole thing out of it. And I'll be like,
is there a kennel in this underground gnome city that's like?
Well, that wasn't. But I think I rolled for that. I'm like, would there be? And I just rolled. Sure, there is. Why not? Except they usually kennel like spiders that people keep as pets down here.
Yeah.
And then I think the elf woman running it was like, "Oh wow, a dog! I haven't seen one of these in ages. I usually just keep spiders."
Yeah, that was it. No, fucking hell, yeah, like seriously, man. Like not for a single second did I think that whole encounter in the mountains and everything like that. And like, yeah, even down to like, geez, like not a second, not for 1 second.
One thing I will say, about that. Okay, I did improv it. One thing I want to make clear is that in the greater context of what's happening, like it's not directly related to the exact quest you're on now, but it has a link to it in how the giants were like, "Oh, you killed that dragon," so so it's a little bit linked in. But like that was not a. Okay, we have seen DMs who do not plan sessions, and it's so obvious, it's painful, because what they do sometimes. Well, one particular DM did to us is he would just stonewall us constantly. He'd have one thing planned where like you come to a door and there's a stone facing the door, and like the door says password, and then you have to come up with the password, and there's no hints and no nothing,
and there's no hinges and no lock.
Yeah, and we're there guessing, and then. The thing is, this particular, like, you have the thing is that the password is password, but you have to get the door to say it. If you
Oh my god, I just remembered that. Oh my
god. Yeah. We were there for ages.
I want to say 45 minutes. I want to say 45 minutes.
It was so long. And like we would then look around and go, is there any other levers in the room? Investigation, perception checks. And the DM be like, nope, you don't see anything. And I'm like, you have no plan here. You're just like, you're purposely letting us sit in this because it's killing time, and it's stalling so that you can still say that we were here for 4 hours, but actually we only did about an hour work. That was just one of it happens a lot, by the way. There was another time when we went into a dwarven city of the dead, and we went down the right hand path and turned the corner. And there was some large insects of some kind, and these things I don't know, we were probably like level 5 or 6, and there was about 6 of us, maybe 7 of us.
7.
And then when that happened, he threw like 5 of these things at us, and they were all like challenge 7, and they were way like we I don't even think we killed one. They were like breathing acid on us and way too powerful, and like we would then we would kill one. And then, but we'd be messed up from it, and there's still more coming. And he described that, you look further in the see there's a nest coming at you, and I'm like, obviously you don't want to. It's that now I know that I'm like, that's such an obvious tell. You don't want to this way or continue exploring. So then we left the entire thing. We just walked out of the dungeon and we're like, we're not surface, and we did that, and then we pissed around and role played being drunk in a fountain.
Oh yeah.
I only remember this because my sister had just died, and I was like, my character was quite depressed, and like I was just like, everybody else is getting drunk in a fountain and having right old friends moment, and I'm just here like crying. But anyway,
do you know
yeah. So okay, so my point I'm trying to make there, it's okay to improv a session, right? But don't bullshit your players, and you're bullshitting your players if they're going somewhere or trying to do something, and you're like, here's a random encounter that's like, oh, you see 3 ogres on the side of the road, and then the combat takes a half hour, and then you're clearly killing time, but this quest has nothing to do with ogres. This quest has everything to do with you fighting bandits or looking for something else. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes random encounters are a thing, that's fine. my point is, don't just give the players busy work. If you're going to give them, if you're going to improv something that's relevant and contributes to the world building and to their understanding of. Don't just roll a random encounter to kill time, or improv something that's like designed to slow the players down. Um, yeah, I can talk more about actually. I think I will. Maybe I'll do it next week. Actually, I do want to do an episode of travel.
Oh, do you know what? I would be very interested to hear what you say about that, because travel is actually one of the things I think I struggle with as a DM, is making traveling interesting.
I think YouTube has hit this kind of this, I don't know what you call it, critical mass, where I think every YouTube D&D channel now has an episode on travel. So much so that, who was I watching the other day? Is it Jenny D? I think Jenny D maybe has a video on it from like a couple months ago.
I need to watch her stuff actually.
She has some really good stuff. But she shows the thumbnails of like 8 other videos from other people. And she's like, so look, it would seem some people have trouble with travel and D&D. And it's like, yeah, you don't say. But yeah, we'll talk about that like maybe next week or something.
Yeah.
But yes, that is my DMing style anyway. It's a lot of winging it. Luckily, my mind, not in a good way, my mind fires all pistons at an insane rate. It's frustrating. I can't keep track of anything. I forget things easily. I lose track of what I'm doing. I'm easily distracted. But it does help with my creativity, and that I can wing something pretty well. And again, my takeaway of my DMing style is just know your world. Know your world. If you know your world really, really well, then or at least have a vague idea of what's going on. The one thing that slips me up is names. If someone asks me, hey Connor, what's the name of this incredibly important castle in the hill? This dark castle that's whatever, I'll be like, I want to give it a good name, but if I just call it like something like moment, I know I won't like it as much. I want it to be relevant, and I want the important name to make linguistic sense.
At the time, I never questioned why the stone giant didn't have a name. Now I look back on it.
Actually, you didn't ask.
I did ask later on.
Did you? You asked later on.
I didn't ask initially, and then asked later on. You were like, his name is Chirnov. That is the only thing. Actually, that's the only time throughout the entire session where I was like, "Do you improv that bit?" Like the rest of the thing completely went by. No problem. I was like, "Jesus, this is very well thought out."
I have a very good visual in my head whenever I which is you good at.
We lost you again.
Oh, you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm quite good at theater of the mind because I have a really good, clear visual idea of what's happening when you guys are like, I see it very clearly in my head, which makes it really good at theater of the mind. But it also, like, my mind will fill in details. If I say there's a stone giant settlement up in the mountains, my mind will automatically paint in some of the surrounding areas, and then I can kind of run with that. Then I'm like, oh, is there a peak nearby? And if I was picturing it at the base of a valley, then I will say no, there is not. But like if I was picturing it on a peak, I'll be like, yeah, it's actually really up. The peak's only about like 200 meters away or something like that. Yeah. So that's how I do the thing.
No, that's dude. Like again, like that's. I can totally see that now that I look back at it and stuff, like in terms of like how you set stuff up. And yeah, it's always super obvious that you do really, really know your world well, because I'll be like, oh, where could I do this thing? And you'll be like, in this city they specialize in this kind of thing, and this is what's going on there. And I'm always like, damn, like that's good. That's really good. Because if someone like, I have lots of places in my world set up that I don't necessarily have mapped out exactly, but in my head I have like a general mental idea of things that would be in this place. So like, for example, I have an area that has Leonin in it, that's sort of based on Chinese culture. It's called, and I think that one's called Huzhou Dao. It's called like the Tiger Isles, I think it translates to, or it's supposed to translate to. Google Translate.
Yeah, I try not. It's definitely not linguistically correct, but I try to. I also don't want to try and make it sound like I'm literally just speaking a different languages for this thing. So I will take the words and I will pull letters. I'll change this O to an A because I want it to sound slightly different.
Yeah, totally. So like I have that place like locked in my mind as a place. I have a general plot line that is going on and is currently advancing still. My players are aware of it, but like if someone turned to me and was like, "What's the capital city of Huzhou?" I'd be like, "It is."
Okay. See, as soon as you said this to me, right, what I would say, okay, this is the kind of way my mind works, right? Because occasionally you guys will ask me questions and I don't know, but I'll improv it in the moment. And that actually, like, I've come up with some really interesting world building stuff. I don't think I would if you hadn't prompted me in the
Totally.
first place.
That's why I ask myself questions when I write sessions now, when I prep for sessions, because like I go like, what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? What's going after this? What's the goal of this? Because then you can just, I think when some like, it's this thing I discovered while talking about D&D to one of my best mates who's not a part of either of our D&D sessions. So they know I have to give them a context and explain things and explain certain things, and like they don't play D&D the same way as we do. They like, and they also play other RPGs. So sometimes I kind of have to explain D&D concepts to them. And I found in doing that and explaining my thought process for it, I was able to elaborate more on stuff that I like. If I had a general idea about something, it was just something I mentioned in a previous thing, they might go, "Oh, that sounds cool. What about that?" And then I go, "Yeah, Jesus, what about that? Like, what? How would that work? Or what's the next thing that person would do?" That's how I came up with my villain's plan. I didn't have a solid final plan for my villain for a long time in the story. I was like, because it needs to be built to. I was like, I have a general idea, but then I was like, here's the general idea of what my villain is doing to a friend of mine, and he was like, oh, and what is like the exact end game? Like, what do they want to happen? Like, if everything goes right for them, what happens to the world? And I was like, crap, what happens to the world? Yeah. And then I was like, I suppose, okay, so he does this, and he wants to do this, and he wants to, yeah, this is what they want. This is what they want now. And I suppose that's kind of a gardener thing that I had to do.
That's like the motivation section that I keep. Like, if I know what the villain, what they want, because I think it's I think motivation is so important. It gets overlooked so often. I think we just grab a necromancer stat block from Volos and pop it in and go, oh, he's a necromancer, he wants dead, them kill people dead, but what is his game? What is his goal? There's got to be something more than simply, I just want to keep making undead for the rest of my life. There's more. There's got to be more to it than that. Does he hate the mayor of this town because the mayor cast him out? I don't know. Did someone in this town murder his wife and then no one did anything about it? And then he's like, I'm going to make them all pay for it. There's got to be something else there.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the thing about the Leonin and like what's the capital city, I immediately went into DM mode and I was like, oh, they actually don't have a capital city. They actually have like multiple, like dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny city-states. But most of them are no more than a couple thousand people, and they don't build cities on the same scale as other cultures. And I'm like, that would have been something I would have thrown.
Nice. Yeah, with that one, there was like the way I thought that out was like it was when I went through the process of adding like 5 or 6 more areas to my world, and I wanted like a sort of a 3 Kingdoms China place, because that's such a cool period of history, and I really love like the feel of like the Dynasty Warrior games and like the romance of the 3 Kingdoms and that stuff. It's all very, very cool, and Lubu is just an awesome character. But when it came to that, I was like, oh, that'd be cool. And I think Leonin had just come out, and I was like, they're cool, they're really cool. And then there was the whole thing of they don't believe in like gods. They used to believe in the gods, and then the gods didn't save them in a time of need, so they entirely turned their back on them. And they believe the gods exist, but they don't believe them worthy of worship. So instead, they focus on self-improvement and self-reliance and that kind of stuff. And I thought that would be a really cool idea for like sort of almost like an isolationist sort of militaristic society as well.
They actually specifically had a stat block for one of their warriors, which is called Leonin Iconoclast.
Yes, that's awesome.
Which is someone who, a person, I have the definition up here because I wanted to get the exact thing. A person who attacks or criticizes cherished beliefs or institutions.
Exactly. So like I had an idea for them to be like quite militaristic, quite like self-sufficient, rugged, kind of that kind of stuff. But there's an undead problem. And because they've been having such a bad undead problem, they've actually reached out to the notable undead / spooky evil thing hunting organization in my world called the Kin. One of my players is a member of the Kin. He was shortly before that raised to a new rank within the Kin, which is Warden, where he is responsible for defending an entire like section of the world now. He has like, if stuff gets bad enough, you call a warden, and a warden will sort things out. That's the
Right.
kind of general attitude. He's like it's like a Witcher, but like a grandmaster Witcher kind of a thing is the best way I could put it. And they specifically requested his help, and like the way to like sort of culturally to impress upon the party how like serious the situation must be. I'm like, I had them roll like history checks and stuff to see what they knew about that area and the people from it. And one of them rolled particularly high. I think it might have been the Blood Hunter because he's quite good at history. But I was like, you would know these people. They're very self-sufficient. They do not believe any of the gods are worthy of worship, and they believe they can handle any problem that arises in their area on their own. They are strong enough to withstand anything. This is who they are, and they do not need outside help. Because I figured if they're like, we relied on outside help before with the gods, and they betrayed us. They let us down in our moment of direness, most dire need. I think that would have a lasting impact on the culture generationally. And I was like, that would motivate them to be very self-sufficient and sort of self-motivated. So I was like, when he rolled particularly, I was like, so you know this about these people, and the fact that they have not only gone to just request someone from your organization in general, like a normal operative, like someone who is like entry level, just fully trained, the fact that they have specifically requested for like one of the highest possible ranks in your order, you think stuff must be really, really dire. And it must have been dire for a long time for it to come to this point where they were not only asking for a kin member, but like a warden of the kin.
Yeah.
That was kind of the approach I took with that. And I suppose I guess that is kind of gardenery, but which is probably why I thought I was a gardener at the start. But yeah, I am conscious of like, no, I'm definitely looking at my own notes now. Yeah, I'm building those buildings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, but I mean, I really feel like there is
it's a mix.
Good.
It's a mesh, like.
Yeah, I think everyone's a mix, just to different degrees.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slider, and people appear in different places. You might be more one or the other. And then there is merits to be had for both of them.
100%.
I think I always go towards a D&D game with the best of intentions with notes. And when I write notes, it's good. But I feel like if you're good at your improv and stuff like that, you could be a gardener as well. I think knowing your world and writing good notes are probably the things to walk away from this podcast episode with.
Yes.
Is write your notes as best you can, but try to find your style. You can see myself and Martin have different things we focus on. I try to focus on character motivations, and I keep a little list of like other quests that are kind of going on in the background. Martin has very particular goals for himself as a DM, like what do I want the party to accomplish in this session, and also putting like in diagrams and stuff like that can be very visually like helpful for you to be able to, even if you need to just like cover part of the page and be like, look, that's what it's going to look like.
I have had to do that so many times.
Yeah, so like I think there's really good merit to both things. I think whatever you, the listener, find yourselves kind of whatever camp you find yourself in, know that I feel like it's a mix. You can draw from both. Like Sanderson said, pull if you're good at writing, if you're good at storytelling, you will pull the best aspects of both. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it's very doable. I think dungeon mastering is a very what's the word for it? It's a very fluid, very
changeable, evolving.
Evolving is a good word. Yeah, it's something you don't just.
I think I know what you mean. It's a skill, not a talent.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You need to put the time. Like you can be naturally good at some things, but you need to put the time in to be good at everything that a DM can do.
Yeah, and it's not even a skill that you literally that you set a goal for. Not like you sit down and you go, I'm going to be a good dungeon master. A lot of being a good dungeon master is finding what that skill is, because your style will differ from everybody else's. The stuff you focus on will be different from the stuff like you even just seeing with me and Martin. The stuff we put in our notes is very, very different. We run different types of games, but people have fun all the same. And I think for that reason, nope, lost it. Never mind. I think I was gonna.
I think as well with the two styles, you like. So part of the reason why I chose to do this, chose this as a topic for this episode, was that I think if you are a DM who knows other DMs, and if you're a friend, and if you have played for those DMs, and they have DM'd for you, I think, at least anyway, from my perspective, there is a perspective of like you only see what works on that side. Like when you are a player, you only see what works. You don't see where like you don't necessarily, unless something goes really wrong, you don't necessarily see where like mistakes are made, or first or second or third tries, or rough drafts, or like the scrappy stuff. And you can get this impression, particularly if you look at someone and you think they're quite good, you can get the impression that they. DMing is intimidating, and if you have friends who also DM and they DM well, and you like to think you DM well, and you're writing all your stuff the entire time, and you see the struggles and the mistakes and the rewrites you have to do, and you see where you have this set of notes written maybe, and you wanted to get this done, but then something changes and you're like, oh god, I have to move this around, and it's not exactly as you wanted it. Whereas if you see someone else DM, you only see it come out as how you think exactly they wanted it to go, and it can be intimidating. And I think a good way to break that down is to, like, warts and all, show how both of us prep. And like I said, like, I was entirely caught off guard because I was an idiot and forgot to name a star that I was intentionally making kind of important, and then I had to just go, it's called Rune, which is stupid. Well, it's not stupid, but it was just like, I could have done a lot better.
Just make it RUN and put one of those kind of Nordic little flicks above the U.
So my remedy for it not being a great name was I really poured it on like him to like explaining why it was like it's a star that's like that's supposed to be like an ancient gate to the giant afterlife. It will lead you to like Valhalla and all this kind of stuff. And I just kind of really poured it on there to make up for the crappy name, because like it's like, oh yeah, there's a broken taillight here, but the rest of the car goes 250 miles an hour. Like, you know what I mean?
Sorry, I just remembered the point I was trying to make.
Oh, please go on.
What I was trying to say was, it's DMing can kind of be a thing that can be learned and cultivated, but not necessarily taught. The books try very hard, and the books give you a lot of information, but realistically, you're only going to grab a certain percentage of that information and incorporate it into your style. I think Martin raises a very good point, where you might be a better DM than you think you are, because obviously you see all the stuff behind the DM screen here, name of this thing, but your players most of the time don't pick up on that. As long as you can improve fast or give them a reason as to why this is the way it is, all the players see is the fun adventure they went on. They don't see the gears turning in the back and the fact that this gear kind of skipped a beat a little bit, you know.
Like I get unreasonably nervous when I have to DM for either you or Gav. Like, there's no good reason for it, but I get like if I have to DM for anyone else in a one shot, I'm like, Grand, I'll do this. If it's you and Gav, I think it's because I'm like, they know how it's made, they know how the sausage is made. They'll see, they'll see that it's all held together with tape and chewing gum.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I get a similar thing. Like if I make a mistake or something goes wrong behind the screen or whatever, or I tell you guys something that I didn't have planned, you and Gavin are the ones I'm looking at, and I'm like, what's their facial expression? Do they look like they're buying it? Because if they're buying it, everyone else is buying it. But if they're not buying it, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, and even if players don't necessarily buy it, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's one thing. At the end of the day, they probably won't remember it.
No one will ever remember the moment you had to sit for 10 seconds and think about the name of the shopkeeper, but everyone will absolutely remember that time that someone rolled a natural 20 and sliced the orc's head off, and they won the battle and they brought the sword back to town and everyone's happy.
Yeah, there's a piece of advice that my old karate teacher gave to me about it was so like to get your next belt up, go from like you say like yellow to purple or whatever. It was to do that you would have to perform it was called like a kata or a form. It's a specific set of movements. It's basically a dance routine. It's like you're fighting imaginary opponents, performing specific moves in a specific order in a specific way to show that you have the knowledge it needs to get to the next level. You'll have to do other stuff as well, but like it'll be like you'll do a bunch of like physical stuff, and then at the end of it, it'll be like, okay, do your kata for your belt. And a thing he said to me was that to like if you're doing something like that, and I think it applies to DMing as well. If you're doing something like that and you make a mistake, unless everyone else watching you has the same level or more experience than you do, you're the only one who knows you made a mistake. If you don't show it in your face, no one else will know, again, unless they have the exact same or more experience than you do. So if you've players in your game that don't DM and you make a mistake, if you just try your best to play it off, or just try and smooth it over and go into and smooth it into another area, and just like kind of just smooth out the road a little. A lot of the time they're not going to notice, and I think that's what everyone worries about most when like prepping for a session or just DMing in general, is like, I'm going to get asked something and get caught out, and then you're like, oh, everyone worries about that moment. No matter how long you've been DMing, you worry about that moment, and I think just don't let it on.
No, it's actually why I like having a DM screen so much. Some people are very anti DM screen because they want to be open and stuff. I'm very pro DM screen because I think it maintains the suspension of disbelief. If you feel, because if you're buying, if the DM is telling you X, Y, and Z is a thing, and if you see them typing this out or writing this as they're saying it, you don't believe it. Then that's not real. That's just made up. Obviously, it's all made up. But if you see it being written down in the moment, you think, oh, he just made that up now. That's somehow less real than it was if he wrote it a half hour ago. So yeah, I think keep that suspension of disbelief, keep that air of mystery when you're a DM. Something I try not to be the DM, and I've been this DM. Try not to be the DM that as soon as you finish the session and someone goes, "That was really cool," go, "Yeah, do you want to see how it works? Because we're really proud of what you did."
Yeah.
But if you show them behind the screen, it was never real.
Yeah.
If you show them how you made it up, how you created this thing from nothing, then it's not real. So don't do that.
I'm really bad if they've had like a hard fight. I'm like, do you want to see the stat block? See what it can do?
Yeah, exactly. But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Awesome. I think that was a really, really good conversation about stuff, and like, yeah, like I like just
eye-opening.
Yeah, as eye-opening, opinion changing, clearly.
Martin's whole world got turned upside down.
Yeah, I got hit with the reverse Uno card 3 minutes into this podcast. But yeah, that was really fun. I think it's an important conversation to have, because obviously one of the most like DMing is intimidating when you first start out, and I think having some kind of guide, or at least being able to see that other people, there's different styles, and what you're doing is valid if it works for you.
Yeah, as long as I mean, it comes down to 90% of stuff we could talk about on any of our podcast. If it works for you and everyone's having fun, go with it.
Absolutely. Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1 N, very important. You can also find me every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Republic. That's at 6 p.m. Irish time. We release new episodes every Friday. Awesome. Martin, where can people find you?
You can find me on the internet on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, and you can also find me on the Micflayers podcast Twitter at MicFlayersPod, both of which will be down in the lower corners of the screen. And most importantly, you can find me right here every Friday, 6 p.m. Irish time on the Micflayers podcast. Have a great day, folks.
Later, folks.
Bye-bye.